No press release, no apology, just a short email sent to guests with the subject line, "Tomorrow's ceremony will no longer proceed as planned." The Whitaker estate in Long Island, once decked out with a wedding tent, Tiffany chairs, and even a special fountain, now looked like an abandoned construction site. The event staff showed up before sunrise to dismantle everything. I stood on the second-floor balcony, looking out at the backyard. Clarissa sat motionless on a white plastic chair, still in her silk robe. Her hair was loosely tied, her eyes swollen from lack of sleep and too many tears. But I knew she wasn't crying over love. Clarissa loved power, not the man beside her. And this morning she had lost both. That night, Ethan came home still smelling of old wine and confusion. He closed the door gently, saying nothing. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the silence stretching long between us. Eventually, he spoke first. I don't get it. What just happened?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I think you know better than anyone. Your family played with fire for too long." Ethan sighed, leaning back in his chair, eyes tired. "Clarissa, she's spiraling. She lost her sponsorships, the media pulled coverage, all the fashion brands that sent dresses pulled out. Even the diamond jewelry she flaunted got recalled. Turns out it was bought using company accounts." I said nothing, I just poured more tea into his cup. "My dad's being summoned for an internal hearing, insider trading suspicions. He mortgaged most of his shares just weeks before the collapse. The board has temporarily removed his authority." Ethan spoke like he was narrating a documentary, like it had nothing to do with his own family. I recognized the shock. He hadn't yet realized where he stood in the rubble. "Did you know this would happen?" he asked slowly. No blame, just a sincere question. I looked down at the teacup in my hands, then answered softly, like a breath. "I knew they'd pay a price. How steep that price would be was entirely their choice." A long silence passed. Ethan nodded, eyes still distant. "It's strange. You're nothing like anyone else in this family, and maybe that's the only reason I still love you." I looked up. In his eyes was something new. Not fear, not disappointment, respect. For the first time in years within the Whitaker household, I wasn't being judged by where I came from or what school I went to. I was the one who stood up at the right moment and didn't lose her self-worth. In the days that followed, the bad news hit like dominoes. The Manhattan office was seized by the bank for unpaid debts. The penthouse, where Clarissa once filmed lifestyle vlogs, was repossessed. She wiped her social media clean after her so-called friends unfollowed her, deleted group photos, and gave exclusive interviews to tabloids saying Clarissa was never truly genuine. Then came a call from Natalie. She invited me to lunch at a small restaurant in Brooklyn. When I arrived, she placed a small navy velvet box on the table. "From my father," she said. "He said this is a reward for the only person in the Whitaker family who actually understood the market." I opened the box. Inside was a silver fountain pen, the nib etched with intricate patterns. On the inside of the cap, a phrase was engraved: "Patience is a kind of wisdom." I smiled and tucked the pen into my coat pocket, not because I needed a reward, but because I knew this was the final recognition, and the one that truly mattered. 3 weeks after Whitaker Holdings officially declared bankruptcy, I returned to the Long Island mansion one last time. The house, once filled with fresh flowers, crystal glasses, and cheerful brunches, was now empty, hauntingly still. The artwork had been taken down, the wine cabinet was bare, and the only sound echoing through the halls was the shuffling of movers. Upstairs, I found a mahogany box neatly placed in the corner of Clarissa's bedroom. Inside were the jewels she once used to cement her status: black Tahitian pearl necklaces, an 8-carat emerald ring once featured in Harper's Luxe, and sapphire earrings that had caused a stir at the Hamptons Gala. I lifted each one, feeling the weight, not of the precious metals, but of what they once symbolized: a world built on arrogance, deceit, and cold ambition. I didn't keep them. I brought everything to the headquarters of HopeWorks Foundation, a scholarship fund for underprivileged children. When I handed the box to the CEO, she looked at me in disbelief. "Are you sure? Each piece could go for 6 figures at auction." I nodded. "Use them to create something that actually matters." A week later, I received a thank you letter. The pieces would be featured in the spring charity auction. For the first time, they wouldn't be worn behind closed doors. They'd be in the spotlight, no longer symbols of status, but of opportunity. Ethan and I moved out of our luxury Manhattan apartment and into a 2-story breadcrumb home in Brooklyn. No concierge, no brass elevator, just a small yard, a few potted plants, and the sound of kids biking down the street. And yet, I felt more at peace than ever. Ethan resigned from Whitaker shortly after the company was officially dissolved. He was offered a teaching position at a private business school in Brooklyn. Not glamorous, but enough to make him smile each morning as he walked out the door. As for me, I began rebuilding my career, not in anyone else's shadow, but from the ground up, for the first time, truly. I called Natalie. "I'm thinking of starting an independent financial consulting firm," I said as we sat at the cafe on the corner, focusing on transparency, ethics, and supporting small businesses. Natalie tilted her head, her eyes lighting up. The next day, I received an email from Lambert Enterprises, sender, Damon. "I believe in intentional beginnings. My door is always open to those who choose a different path." Horizon Strategies was born that February, a name Ethan came up with, meaning always looking forward. Our first office had just 4 people, 2 recycled wood desks and a noisy coffee machine, but I had never seen a space more full of hope. Natalie, now officially the CEO of Lambert after Damon stepped into the chairman role, was the first to sign a strategic partnership with us. Lambert didn't need new partners, but they chose us for one reason. They believed in work rooted in real values, not manipulation. Under Natalie's leadership, Lambert entered a new era, quieter, deeper, more human. Meanwhile, Horizon began earning trust from family businesses, tech startups, and nonprofit organizations, those long ignored by the financial world dominated by names like Whitaker.
My name is Alice, and that evening, the moment I stepped into the restaurant and the warm, golden light caught on every crystal wine glass, I understood immediately that I wasn't meant to be there. The rehearsal dinner for my sister-in-law Clarissa's wedding was hosted at an upscale Italian restaurant perched above the Hudson River, all elegance and deliberate perfection. Ivory peonies rested at the center of every table, soft piano music floated through the air, and the view outside the windows looked like something pulled from a glossy magazine. Everything was flawless. Everything except me. There was no seat with my name on it. I stood there in the middle of the reception area, suddenly weightless and invisible, as if I'd wandered into the wrong event. A few guests glanced at me briefly, their eyes sliding over my dress before flicking away, the same way one looks at staff who've entered at the wrong moment. I searched the room for the seating display, hoping I'd missed something. Nothing. Along the long, silk-draped table were delicate handwritten place cards, beautiful and intentional, each one placed with care. Mine wasn't among them. Clarissa rose slowly from her seat at the head of the table. Her champagne-colored satin dress clung to her perfectly, as though it had been designed specifically for this moment of quiet triumph. She lifted her glass and approached me, her smile polished and sharp beneath its sweetness. "Alice, oh my gosh, you actually came," she said lightly. "We only reserved seats for people who are officially part of the ceremony." A few restrained chuckles rippled behind her, mostly from my husband's family friends, finance types who preferred balance sheets over basic decency. I turned instinctively toward Ethan, my husband, standing near the bar beside his parents. He didn't look at me, not once. He raised his glass to an older man in a pinstriped suit and laughed as if I weren't standing there being erased in front of both families. Clarissa tilted her head, feigning concern. Do you want me to repeat the invitation details? She asked. This is really a family-only gathering. Something cold settled into my chest. I had tolerated Clarissa for 3 years, endured the sideways glances, the compliments laced with quiet cruelty, but this was different. This was public, deliberate, and Ethan still said nothing. I smiled, controlled and measured. Of course, I replied. I'll just freshen up. I turned and walked away, my heels clicking against the marble floor. No one stopped me. No one followed. I didn't leave the building. I stepped onto the balcony overlooking New York City, the skyline glowing beneath the night sky. The breeze brushed my cheek, grounding me. I opened my clutch, pulled out my phone, and sent a short message. No explanation, no emotion, just a signal. That message was the spark Clarissa never saw coming. 6 days later, I walked into the annual Harper Foundation Gala. The event drew nearly every major figure on the East Coast, hosted inside the Museum of Modern Art beneath towering crystal chandeliers. Chamber music filled the space, precise and curated, matching the wealth of the room. Clarissa was one of the co-hosts that night. She wore a deep red gown that clung to her like ambition itself, a diamond bracelet flashing at her wrist. At her side stood her father, Charles Whitaker, chairman of Whitaker Holdings, a man who had always treated me like an embarrassing mistake his son had brought home. But the most important presence wasn't Clarissa or Charles. It was Franklin Hawthorne, the gala's primary sponsor and the formidable CEO of Hawthorne Group, a venture capital empire controlling billions across the country. Franklin didn't attend events casually. Every move he made was calculated, and Clarissa knew it. She had been openly chasing a communications director role within Hawthorne's charitable foundation, calling it her final ascent into relevance. Around 8 o'clock, Clarissa took the stage, champagne glass raised. The room fell quiet. She thanked Franklin with a tone that was overly sweet, then joked about his reputation as the investment eagle, making remarks that skirted admiration and landed squarely in mockery. The room cooled instantly. Franklin smiled faintly, but his eyes hardened. When Clarissa joked about his acquisitions, including a hospital system turned luxury wellness chain, the silence became heavy. Franklin stood, left without a word. Later, I stood in the hallway with Natalie Hawthorne, Franklin's daughter and my closest friend since college. Natalie whispered that her father had already called legal, that Clarissa had just given him the excuse he'd been waiting for. Clarissa was still inside, smiling, unaware that her toast had started something irreversible. After the gala, while Clarissa basked in attention, I sat alone in my office, staring at a financial map of Whitaker Holdings I had quietly assembled over the past year. Every risky deal, every dependency, all tied to Hawthorne Capital. Clarissa thought the upcoming rehearsal dinner was about candles and flowers. For me, it was about timing. I made the call that night. I spoke to Franklin directly. I didn't ask him to stop what he was planning. I asked him to move faster. He agreed. 2 days later, Natalie confirmed the plan. Funds would be pulled at exactly 8 o'clock on Friday night, while Charles stood on stage announcing a new strategic alliance. For the first time in years, I felt steady. Clarissa had no idea that by humiliating me, she had created someone she couldn't anticipate. Quiet, patient, ready. The next morning, the headlines read, Whitaker Holdings plummets. Golden Alliance dissolves into thin air. Clarissa and Alexander's wedding, the one splashed across every outlet for weeks, was canceled by noon.
One day, I asked Natalie, do you think we're doing the right thing, not playing the games the old world thrives on? She just smiled. Alice, sometimes changing the world starts with refusing to follow it. That night, I sat on our tiny second-floor balcony watching the streetlights flicker below, a cup of tea in hand. Ethan came up behind me and draped a thick-knit cardigan over my shoulders. You've got that meeting with the micro-investment group tomorrow, right? I nodded. They manufactured toys for kids on the autism spectrum. No one will lend to them, but I think they deserve a shot." Ethan smiled. "If anyone understands how to give people a chance at the right moment, it's you." A breeze rustled through the trees. I looked up at the dark sky. No stars, but completely peaceful. 3 months after Horizon Strategies officially launched, I received an unexpected call from an international number. When I picked up, I heard Charles Whitaker's voice, lower, raspier, and surprisingly stripped of arrogance. "Alice, thank you for picking up. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I just wanted to say I was wrong." I said nothing, not out of anger, but surprise. This was the man who once looked at me like I was the only stain on his family's perfect portrait. "I'm living with my brother in Vermont," he continued, "doing freelance consulting, writing strategic reports for a few startups. They don't know I once ran a billion-dollar company. They just see an old man who listens." His voice hesitated for a moment, then continued. "I thought I'd taught Clarissa everything she needed, but I never taught her how to lose, and then she lost the hard way. Now she's starting over." I had heard about Clarissa. After being cut off by her friends and abandoning her social media, she was sent to a finishing school in Lausanne, Switzerland, a place that trained heiresses in poise and silence. Not everyone would understand, but I did. For Clarissa, it was a psychological sentence. Charles sighed. "I don't expect forgiveness, but if someday you think I'm worth it, let me know." The call ended in silence, but for me, it was a quiet closure. No resentment, no debts to settle, just a man learning how to step down from his throne on his own feet. That spring, Zoe sent a wedding invitation to Ethan and me. The ceremony took place in a small garden at the Museum of Modern Art, the place where they first met during a charity fundraiser. No ball gown, no drone cameras, just an intimate gathering of close friends under blooming cherry blossoms. Zoe wore a simple white silk dress, holding hands with James, a literature professor at NYU she had once sat next to at a cultural symposium. No prenups, no investors in sight, just honest, gentle glances between two people who never expected to find each other in a city this loud. Ethan and I sat in the second row, next to Damon, now retired from the spotlight, but still sharp-eyed as ever. As Zoe reached the end of the aisle, I heard him whisper, "For the first time in my life, I'm investing in something that doesn't need a return." Ethan held my hand under the table. Without saying a word, I knew exactly what he was thinking. We had weathered the storm, not to return to what was, but to discover a version of us that was new, one with no shadow of Clarissa, no pressure from the Whitaker name, just us. When the party ended, Zoe pulled me aside into a corner of the garden. "I still have the letter you sent last year, the one where you said you wanted to change how the world treats those seen as not good enough. You did it, Alice." I chuckled softly. "Not quite, but I've learned I no longer need anyone else to define me." Zoe handed me a small box. Inside was a delicate necklace with a compass pendant. "To remind you, the right direction isn't always marked on someone else's map." That night, as Ethan and I returned to Brooklyn, light rain had just fallen. We stood by the window, watching droplets collect on the glass. Everything felt still, peaceful. Ethan placed a hand on my back. "You know something? I never thought I'd be happy walking away from the old world, but because of you, I've learned how to begin a new chapter." I smiled and rested my head on his shoulder. "I don't need fame. I don't need applause. What I have and choose to hold on to is a life that's real, a life where I don't have to ask anyone's permission to exist, where I can build good things in my own way. And if someone asks what I did to change everything, I'll say this: I simply waited for the right moment and didn't miss it." My story didn't begin with power or status. It began with silent years of being overlooked. But in that silence, I learned to observe, to wait, and to reclaim my worth with clarity and resolute. Today, I live a life not defined by the name on a gate, but by the values I create each day. Justice was served, not with noise, but with the quiet strength of someone who knows she no longer has anything to prove. What do you think of Alice's choices and the transformation of those who once looked down on her? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional, unexpected, and inspiring family stories.